Hello everyone, and welcome to the Farmers Supply Association Agri Report. I'm Randy Klepechka, agronomist with Farmers Supply Association. We are taping on August the 20th, and as you can see behind me, rice harvest is now underway. Sometimes with the stripper header you can't see it as well as you know the previous types of headers that we use, but anyway, harvest has started. It started last Thursday in our area, and still very limited. You know, the harvest is going on a very limited basis right now, but it is underway. I think next week we'll really pick up a lot, probably. Really too early to talk about any yields or milling. My gut feeling on yields is it's not going to be a bin buster, but it's not going to be as bad as we thought maybe it could have. You know, when you get that much heat, you know, during the grain field, during pollination and grain field, you're always worried that it's going to affect everything negatively, but and it will affect yield, I'm pretty sure, but I don't think it's going to be as bad as we feared it, you know, maybe it could at one time. Milling, you know, it's just, there's not a lot of optimism about milling after the last couple of years or last few years, so, you know, hopefully we'll be surprised, but again, it's just, you know, the way it's gone the last few years, it's hard to be optimistic about it. You know, with heat we've been through, and also especially if we get into some showers and some wetting and drying, that's always, you know, aggravates the milling. But, you know, at least the forecast is not really calling for much rain, so that'll be good for the rice. If we don't get, you know, we just need to harvest and not get that wetting and drying. There's a few questions I'm getting on different things right now. I want to talk about the current topics and some of the questions I'm getting related to rice. Number one, stink bugs. And you know, some people have already, you know, quit on stink bugs. You know, the numbers have been real variable this year. You know, I've had several fields that I've recommended treatment on. Then you'll go to a field adjacent or next farm over, and you know, numbers will be real low. But again, you know, they're spotty, but there certainly are treatment levels out there, and that's still going on. I've heard some people, you know, about quit scouting already. Don't do that. I got a call just probably 30 minutes ago when I was before I came out here, and it was a guy that's got, you know, well over 1,000 acres of rice. He hadn't sprayed any up till now, but his consultant told him he's got some he needs to spray now, so he's going to spray tomorrow on that. So got to keep going until that termination stage. And that's one thing I wanted to mention is termination. Dr. Nick Bateman with the University of Arkansas has done some really good work on that. The last 10 years we've kind of changed a lot of things on stink bug recommendations in rice, and he's done some great work, and we've really got a handle on that pretty well, I think, right now. But again, termination is when 60% of that head or panicle is straw colored. You want it to be at least that far along, and then you can kind of stop worrying about stink bugs, although when you get to that point, you want to be pretty clean. You know, I'd say at least a half a threshold or less, you know, certainly under, you know, that treatment threshold of 10, and then you can kind of call it a year as far as stink bugs go. But let's have those numbers down there at that point, at least, like I said, at least below 10 and preferably, you know, below half a threshold. And, you know, if we get to that point, then I feel like we can quit the stink bugs, but don't give up until then, because they can do damage, you know, as long as that they can still penetrate that kernel. So, you know, as far as products, there's only one product, in my opinion, that's Tenchu. You know, some people may still try to use Lambda or something like that, and universities, you know, says maybe you can use Lambda at this termination stage, and I don't do it. I've just seen too many bad results really since 2020 with Lambda that I can't recommend it at all. So, you know, I go Tenchu. One thing you can do, I mean, the normal rate's 8 ounces, but when you get down there maybe a week from that termination point, you know, and we don't need much residual, then I think maybe we can cut back to like 5 ounces, and that's what the company recommends. So, you know, if you're getting near the end and you need to spray, you don't need to go the full 8, maybe go 5 or something like that, and that'll take care of them. So that's one of the main questions I'm getting is stink bugs. Next thing is draining, and that's always it's almost more of an art than a science, I think. You know, that's one of those questions I get a lot every year, and I kind of draw up because you always hate to recommend that for somebody else. You're afraid you're going to drain too early or drain too late. So, you know, there's no really hard, fast rule as such. In my opinion, what you need to have good moisture all the way till the time that combine's about to hit the field. Good moisture, not mud, not water, just good moisture. And if you've got that, then I think you've done it just right. You know, if you have good moisture right at the time that combine hits the field, not excessively dry, not muddy or water, then you've done it right. It's really a balancing act. You know, there's a lot of things you got to take into effect. Of course, number one, the stage of the rice. And Jared Hartke with the University of Arkansas has a pretty good rule of thumb to start with, and that is you want probably 2/3 of that panicle or head to be straw colored, that brown ripe color. And you want at least that, and if you've got that, then you're in pretty good shape probably to go ahead and drain. But there's other things you got to take into effect. Again, it is a balancing act, and the other things you got to take into effect, the type of ground it is. If it's heavy gumbo that stays wet, flat gumbo, then you can probably pull it maybe a little bit earlier than that. The weather. The weather up until really today has been so hot and dry that you were hesitant really to pull that water too early. So, now we're getting to the point, especially next week, where that temperature is going to back off a little bit and make it a little easier to drain and not be worried about it drying out too quick. So keep that in mind. When are you going to harvest? That's one thing maybe we haven't taken into account as much as we should. If a guy's got 1,000+ acres of rice that he's going to be cutting with one combine, it's going to take a while to cut all that. So keep that in mind. The first few fields you're going to cut, well, yeah, you can drain those, at the regular time. But if there's some that's going to be 2 or 3 weeks before you ever get to them, in all likelihood, and it's got a dry weather forecast, you probably need to wait a little while because, again, we want to keep good moisture in that ground all the way until that combine hits the field. So again, it's just a balancing act, but again, the goal should be to have good moisture at the point that combine hits the field. Again, not too dry, not too wet at that point, but you want moisture really up until then. That'll negate any bad things from happening, such as lodging and that kind of thing. So I'll keep that in mind. Don't get as many calls on this next topic as I used to, salting. When I first started as a county agent in Randolph County back in 1982, it's already been 43 years, but I used to get a lot of calls on salting, and people want me to come look at the heads and see if I thought it was all right to salt. I guess some people have got burned over the years but from salting and not harvesting it quick enough, so I don't get as many calls on salting as I used to. Still get some, but not like I used to. So there's several things you got to keep in mind if you do want to try to salt your rice to maybe speed up harvest, or if you got some, a lot of foliage and stuff you want to dry up. So there's some things to keep in mind. First thing, you got to know your moisture. There's a couple ways to do that. I like it if you can get a combine out there and get the moisture, but a lot of times that's not real practical just to get your combine out just to get a sample. So, a lot of people won't do that. And then if that's not the case, they're going to get a hand sample. A hand sample is not as accurate. So, if you're going to get a hand sample, you probably need to add 2, maybe 3% to that hand sample, and that'll tell you more what your true moisture is. So remember, a hand sample plus 2 to 3%. And then what do we want it at, in order to apply the salt? As far as varieties, a maximum of 25% moisture or less. If it's hybrids, 23% moisture or less. Hybrids have that longer panicle and more of a range of grain types on their moisture, situations. So again, 25 or less for varieties, 23 or less on hybrids. I like to maybe a tick down from that. I just don't like doing it too quick. So, but 25 and 23 are the maxes, and maybe just a little bit below that in my opinion. The big key after that is harvest that rice after you've salted it within 5 days. And I think that's where a lot of people have gotten burned over the years and just hate and despise salt now. They've put it out there and it just took too long, or maybe salted too much at one time, and they couldn't get it cut in 5 days, and you start to get the issues with drying and things like that. So, and also, or maybe the weather don't cooperate. You get a rainy period or something like that. So, let's try to get it, or not just try. You really need to absolutely get it cut within 5 days if at all possible. And then you've just got to stagger your salting dates if you do that. You can't salt a lot at one time. You've got to stagger those dates, and maybe every few days salt a little more if you're wanting to salt. So again, that's just the main thing is put it out at the right moisture, and the main thing is getting it cut, within 5 days, because that's where you're going to get your trouble. When you get the over drying, you can get some shattering, you can get milling issues, and just nothing good's going to happen after that. So again, that's some of the things we're looking at, or I'm getting questions on, getting field calls about as we move closer to this, get really into this harvest situation. Again, it's good to get it started over the last week. I think next week and certainly the week after that, this thing will really get going. And next month when I do my September report, I hope I can have a lot of maybe some surprising yield news and some surprising milling news. So hopefully we can be talking about that next month. For more information, you can contact me through Farmer Supply Association, and this has been Randy Klepechka with your Farmer Supply Association Agri Report.